All right, so now that we kind of mentioned David Bakhtiari already, there was some kind of news this week, or him and Aaron Rodgers kind of were talking over social media, and there was a few Instagram stories, and I think even posts that Rodgers tagged Bakhtiari in, and the Jets could definitely need some offensive line help. There's been rumors swirling that Bakhtiari could possibly go to the Jets, even though Schefter denied that and said that was false. There was actually no rumors about that, and I think the Packers probably would not trade him, but what do you guys think about that whole situation? And do you think it's more of Rodgers playing fun with Bakhtiari? Or is he just trying to openly recruit him?
Wags?
Well, first of all, Rodgers is a world-class troll, and I mean that in the nicest way. Because, I think both he and David know exactly what they're doing. They're just messing around with people right now. The reality is that David Bakhtiari, for the Packers to trade him, and I'm not just talking about the Jets, it's any team. They would carry, I believe, over a $19 million cap hit for both this season and next season. So right off the bat, they owe David Bakhtiari $23 million this season. They trade him. They're basically just carrying an entire dead cap hit. So would you want to keep David Bakhtiari for essentially, if you think about it, an extra $3-4 million? I think most teams would probably sign up for that, even with his injury history and the fact that he's past his age 30 season. So just from a financial standpoint, it really makes almost no sense for the Packers to trade David. And then talking about traded David to the Jets, Packers really want to get as high of a draft pick as possible. So if you're a Packer fan or any part of the Packer organization, you're cheering for two things: for Aaron Rodgers to play a minimum of 65.1% of the snaps for the Jets this season, because 65% or higher, trade escalator kicks in. Packers are eligible for the Jets' first round pick. And for the Jets, frankly, not to do so well with Aaron Rodgers under center this season. So trading David to the Jets is actually counterproductive for the second piece of that. Maybe not so much for the first piece. You could argue that, well, if you want Aaron Rodgers to stay upright and not get hurt, maybe they should help them upgrade their offensive line. But I don't think the Packers are feeling particularly generous when it comes to the New York Jets. They've got a young quarterback that we just talked about earlier in Jordan Love. And boy, would they love to be able to give him plenty of time and protection as he learns and works through his progressions in his first season as a starter. So just from both a financial and practical standpoint, I don't see the Packers trading David Bakhtiari, period, but especially to the New York Jets. So I tend to think it's just David Bakhtiari, Aaron Rodgers, good pals, having some fun, trolling everyone in the media and all the fans out there, particularly the Jets fans that are really getting excited about the possibility of Aaron, the GM of the New York Jets, bringing his old buddy back in.
Did you want to mention that, or did you want to talk a little bit about that, or did you have anything to say?
I agree. I mean, David's not going to the Jets. Do I think there's a possibility, some remote possibility, that Bakhtiari's traded either now or at the deadline? Sure. Packers have done some interesting stuff in the past. There's a guy named Josh Sitton who's actually getting put into the Packer Hall of Fame this year, who is entrenched as a starting guard for the Packers. And right before training camp wrapped up and regular season started, the Packers cut him. And so they've done things. Now, that was a number of years ago, completely different circumstance. The cap hit was nowhere near what this cap hit is. So he's not going to the Jets. Bach's not going to the Jets. I think that the Packers would love, as Wag said, to see the Jets, have Aaron under center for those 65% and lose a ton of football games and get that high first round pick. But does Bakhtiari end up in another uniform at some point in the next couple of years? Potentially, but I don't think it's going to be in New York unless he's, cut, the ties are cut and he ends up as a free agent. But I don't see the Packers doing that anytime soon either.
Yeah, I'd agree. He may get traded, but I think it's a much, much higher possibility it's at the end of the season. And then we'll look at what the financial ramifications are at that point. But I just don't see it as a very realistic possibility anytime this season.
Yeah, and one last thing. I mean, Wags mentioned earlier that the Packers have potentially up to 7 offensive linemen that could be starters in this league. And, one of them, there's a battle right now at right tackle between Zach Tom and Yash Nyman. excuse me, I think both those guys could play. I think Yash could be starting left tackle in the league. I think Zach Tom could be the future starting right tackle for the Packers. So, they do have that depth, but we also know this is a league and a position that's riddled by injuries. And I'm not really looking to, trade from a place of strength and become weak all of a sudden because one or two injuries to the offensive line, which by the way, happens all the time in this league, could go from Jordan Love being upright, throwing balls and getting more comfortable at the NFL level to, running for his life, so to speak. And I don't think we're looking for that this season.
Yeah. And I forgot, and too, with you kind of mentioned that the Packers traded Rodgers to the Jets this year, and they play at least I think it's either a 65 or 75% chance if he plays, they get the Jets first round pick.
Yep, 65, yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of that trade between Rodgers and the Jets was basically a standoff pretty much the whole offseason. I don't know if they want to go through that again with another Packers player. So I don't know. That's another thing that doesn't really make any sense. And I didn't think it was going to be a trade, but I just thought it was interesting because the Jets desperately, and not necessarily desperately, but they need an offensive line. And it seems like that might be the weak part of a Jets team, especially Rodgers is going to be 40, in November, December. So that doesn't exactly sound great. But then you also mentioned that the Packers have a lot of depth at offensive line. Not many teams in the NFL right now have a lot of depth at offensive line. So that I think it helps the Packers out with and you have a younger quarterback too. So I think that's kind of a situation where you just don't think that's going to end up happening. It's just kind of a thought maybe, but
and JJ, one last thing that I don't think enough Jets fans maybe are thinking about, but we're very, very keen on is the fact that if the Jets do look to, find another offensive lineman or another position via a trade, good luck trading that first or second round pick because they'd have to come back to the Packers to negotiate that out of that contract. Because right now, both of those are tied up until they determine, how many snaps Aaron Rodgers plays. So potentially there's more back and forth between the Packers and the Jets, but the Packers not only, are held the chips, I think, this whole offseason, but they still hold the chips for the Jets first and second round picks should they want to upgrade significantly on that offensive line this season.
Yeah, I would just really love to have another round of Twitter wars between Packer fans and Jets fans about which front office holds leverage in the trade negotiations. That was just such enthralling and exciting time in our offseason. So could we revisit that, please, and have David Bakhtiari on the trade table between the Jets and the Packers?
that would be definitely fun to watch again.